right, hello everybody, and welcome to our final Q&A for the OC Film Fiesta, 11th year of the festival, first virtual festival. It was an amazing event, and we had probably over 30 Q&As this year, so being virtual actually helped us connect with the filmmakers even more so. So we're very happy about that. And just a note on the festival technically ends tonight at 11:45, but if you buy a ticket or a pass and you unlock the movie that you're going to watch, you have 48 hours to watch it. So you can actually be watching films until Tuesday. If you've been binge watched the festival, and then one day you can do that too. But anyways, we're very excited today because one of the films we added toward the end of our announcement of films is a wonderful documentary called Linda and the Mockingbirds, which is basically, it's a documentation of a trip that music legend Linda Ronstadt took with Los Cenzontles from the Bay Area, a musical group, and James Keach, the director of the documentary The Sound of My Voice, the Linda Ronstadt documentary that came out last year. Really amazing film. And we've got them all here today for a Q&A, so we're really excited. I want to get right into it because I know you guys are going to have some questions toward the end also. But first of all, let's welcome Eugene Rodriguez.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be here. I'm happy to be here.
All right, so tell us about yourself and your organization in Northern California.
Well, I started Los Cenzontles, which means the Mockingbirds, over 30 years ago as a youth group. And for me, it was just a way to connect to my own culture. And the kids that I was teaching became my conspirators, my collaborators on this journey to discover deep roots music. And the work was very profound. It had a profound effect on our lives in many ways. So eventually, 1994, I incorporated the nonprofit. And 4 years later, in 98, we got a space. We transformed a liquor store into a cultural center and a strip mall. And ever since then, we've been producing music, producing films, doing tours, connecting to our culture, connecting to other people's culture. And we will continue to do it as long as there's a need and as long as we can.
Awesome. And James Keach, the director of this film, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got invited on this trip to Mexico.
Yes, I got invited by Linda, who wanted to do it. I wanted to do an interview for The Sound of My Voice, and she said, "I'd love to do an interview, but I'll do it with you in Mexico. If you come on this trip, you'll have the opportunity to interview me, and you'll be able to film and meet Eugene Rodriguez and film the dancers, and which is something I loved. And of course, I took Linda up on it because I really needed an interview for The Sound of My Voice. And as I say in the film, you tricked me, but it was a good trick. It really wasn't a trick. It was an opportunity to really tell a great story, Eugene's story and the kids.
Awesome.
Story, Linda.
Awesome. And in the documentary, another friend of Linda's goes down with you. And he basically says, when Linda Ronstadt asks you to go on a bus trip to Mexico, you go. And that person is Jackson Brown. So he was on another trip with you guys down there too. So Linda, welcome to our Q&A. It's an honor to have you here. Tell us about what inspired you to make this film, to have this journey.
Well, the film was being made about me. I didn't originate it. Somebody was already making one. And I've gotten tired of, over the years, people marginalizing the fact that I was Mexican American. It was always sort of ignored or sort of mentioned as a also ran. So that's why I told James that if he wanted to interview me, he had to go to Mexico. So I planned to go to Mexico anyway, and then I invited Eugene to go because I thought it'd be fun to take the kids. So we were going with 20 school kids, and Eugene was going to do a video of his own. They often make their own videos of the trip. And then when it became that it was too many people on the bus, so we decided to share a film crew. And that's how the two things sort of got blended together.
Oh, that's great. And you're in Arizona, in Tucson. You're very proud of your Arizona heritage. Tell us about
the Sonoran Desert. It's the Sonoran Desert is one continuous region that exists on both the north and the south side of the border. There's a ugly fence that runs through it right now, but that's unfortunate. A little dynamite, we can get rid of that.
and well, with the way they're building the fence, it'll fall over on its own, I think. But yeah, we do.
On its own, hopefully not scare any mountain lions.
Yeah. So tell us about what you discovered on this trip in terms of, here in the U.S., there's a lot of kind of falsely generated xenophobia against Mexicans, but I don't think that's reciprocated in Mexico. Like, they don't spend their days thinking about us, So how were you guys received?
Well, the thing is, if you in this part of the desert that I know, which is all ranching country in northern Mexico, if your car breaks down by the side of the road, they'll stop and help you fix it. They'll drive an hour to get a part if they need to do that. And our side of the line, if you break down on the side of the road, they'll run over you. Everybody's so nice. I mean, like, for instance, the day that we arrived at the border was the day that the Trump administration had declared a state of emergency at the border. We crossed the border to see what the state of emergency was, and it's 3 citizens in the street shopping for groceries or picking their kids up from school. It was hordes of brown people clawing to get over the fence.
Right. I mean, I'm from San Diego, and the border region seems to be politicized every election cycle. But living there, you don't see anything resembling what they're describing. So it's really
no, just people living their lives. And the people that now that since they've started this cruel policy of making people wait in Mexico while they're waiting to apply for citizenship, they just pile up in camps in the mud. So they're generating an unhealthy situation.
Yeah, a lot of the unhealthy conditions and problems are created by bad policy, and it's unfortunately that nobody comes in there to actually try to make it better. They always end up making it worse, to make it look worse. Like they're talking about, all these, the more they focus on, look, we're going to go round up undocumented people, then they say, oh, look, we have all these undocumented people in jail. It's a created situation. But the culture, the music, and you guys do a really good job of explaining this in the film. And it really is beautiful, a film to watch, so heartwarming. Tell us about how music can communicate and take down all those walls.
Well, me?
Yes.
Well, music is ubiquitous. Art is ubiquitous. It's in all cultures. It was even there in the prison camps during the Nazi era. It's been everywhere, and it should be in schools, but unfortunately it's not. Eugene's organization teaches children from an early age how to play instruments, sing, dance, and visual art also, which is also brilliant. And they learn how to do that to incorporate, make their lives richer, not to be performing seals. It's a different kind of pedagogy than teaching performers. It's not a school for the performing arts. But they acquire a very high level of skill with these instruments, and especially learning deep traditional kinds of Mexican music that connects them back to their grandparents' generation, where they came from. So I think that really helps them be proud of who they are and where they came from. I grew up feeling that way. I grew up in the white bubble of privilege, so it's easy for me to be Mexican. Nobody quite believed I was Mexican until I took them home for Christmas and we ate tamales. And everybody sang in Spanish at my house. They spoke 2 languages. Mostly sang in Spanish and spoke in English. That's what I grew up doing. That English was the music language and English was speaking language.
And I think that creating that space, and I think Eugene mentions that a little in the film, that it's such a wonderful way of sharing culture, of bonding as families, that it's a shame when people immigrate, say here, that's kind of discouraged or taken away. Eugene, can you tell us about what your perspective of that is, from your perspective there in the Bay Area, how just because you guys dance and you play and you perform, so the confidence that gets into the children and the families, and the parents look really proud in the film. So can you talk about that?
Well, I grew up in the LA area, and my mother's family was from Chula Vista, and 2 of my uncles were mariachi musicians, not by profession, but in the home. My aunt sang ranchera music, so my fondest memories were music at home, music at my grandma's house. And there's an aspect of music that's performative, but there's an aspect that's also just family, and that's the part that intrigues me. I mean, we do performances, but I think that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. So for me, in my life, because of when I was born, it wasn't so easy to feel connected to both sides. I mean, I felt connected to both sides of my heritage, both American and Mexican. But, you know, there's lots of things in the world that make you choose one or the other. And I always rejected that. I've basically spent my life trying to reconcile those parts of me. And I think this film resonates with people because, first of all, James is a master filmmaker, and I want to thank him for the amazing work that he's done on this film to get our story out to a broader audience, but also a mixed audience in a way that is unusual. You know, it was important for me to reach the Mexican audience, which it does, and it was important to James, according to his interviews, to reach people who look like him, and it does that as well. And it took Linda's vision, I think, to put us together and to make really a remarkable film of honesty with the production values that James has in his blood and with the authenticity that is characteristic of Los Cenzontles. So I think that when we talk about borders, the most painful border is the border that we carry within ourselves. And I think that's the border that this film really discusses. Of course, it discusses the scar in the Sonoran desert and through Tijuana. But I think it's that border within ourselves that is the most difficult to heal. And I think with this film, I'm hoping that that scar will begin to heal for many of us.
Yeah, I think that, you know, in watching it, I mean, one thing, because California is different from, you know, the experience in California is different from Arizona and Texas and you know, New Mexico, the other border states. We have some people in the audience from Texas, and Texas, even though there's a lot of, you know, there's been a history of oppression and discrimination, there is a prouder connection to the Mexican Tejano culture that they are very proud of, you know, going back to the 1700s. And I think New Mexico and Arizona share more of that than California. In California, it seems to be really marginalized and erased. And, you know, growing up in LA, you definitely see that. And we've been talking about that in Hollywood, where Los Angeles is like 60, 70% people of color, but Hollywood films are like 1% people of color. So there's a serious disconnect in the transmission of the culture through the official channels. So live performance, community organizations like yourselves are so important. And I'm glad to hear that you're using media and filming to be part of your storytelling and documenting and sharing of your work. So James, tell us about you know, going on the trip. You're working on this larger documentary, and how did the experience that you had on the bus, you know, with Linda and Jackson and all these folks, change your perception or color the you know, what you were doing on the larger documentary?
Well, first of all, Eugene, thank you for your kind words, and I appreciate it. I grew up in South Texas, and it was very strange to me. On one side of the town, the Mexican people lived, and on the other side of the town, the black people lived, and the white people lived in the middle. And it always bothered me. And my grandmother's, her best friends were the people that worked in her house. She bought homes for them. And I would say to them, well, if they can make dinner for us, why can't they sit down at the table with us? So my whole life, I've grown up with I've always wanted to change that reality. I've made films that get into this, and I thought, you know, when I met Lucina and I talked to Eugene and I talked to Linda, it was so powerful to me because it resonated with me about my childhood, of something I couldn't understand, you know. And when we hit the border, it blew my mind. And when Eugene told me the story of Lucina and Fabiola and the families, and Linda when we got into her family, I found it just was something I really had to do. It wasn't a film that I ever thought that I was going to do. I thought I was going to go down and do the historical you know, recording of Eugene's group and the dancers from both sides and do an interview with Linda. But their story, your story, is different than my story, and my story is one that I'm not happy that I grew up with that, and I'm not happy that my children would grow up with that, and I'm not happy our society has been fed that kind of stuff by people in Washington, D.C. And so, as you said, when we crossed the border, this bile was coming out of Washington, D.C. And it was just something that, you know, I wanted to understand how Mexican people felt about it, people that looked different than me. And then I wanted people that looked like me to understand that we are all the same. Our families are the same. We, as Jackson says, we are all immigrants. And film is, you know, it's obviously, you guys are musicians and you tell your stories in music. I tell my stories in film, but I also find that music, you can tell the hard stuff as we do in the film. Some of the songs are from Woody Guthrie or Eugene Jackson songs. They're political, and yet we're not hammering anybody over the head. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to bring them in and engage them, and that's what we want to do with the film. And I'm hoping that it's doing that, and I hope everybody gets out to vote. It's really important. And anyway, I'm really pleased I got the opportunity to make it and to learn something about other people that I didn't know, and hopefully spread the word of kindness, empathy, compassion, you know, and please vote. I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
And anyone who's grown up in the border region knows that, you know, we said earlier that the kind of the mediated message of all this conflict and violence and whatever is not real at all. But if you grew up even in the 60s and 70s, you know, people will tell you, you know, there was no fence. You know, in the 50s, people would just walk across, go to work, walk back. It's only become more politicized recently over the past, you know, 30, 40 years. But it's important to remember that it wasn't always like that. And of course, during World War II, when the U.S. needed Latin America's help and Mexico's help, the good neighbor policy, it was like, oh, we're all friends. So just know that this thing that we're seeing isn't the way it's always been. Linda, can you talk to us about, you know, growing up in Arizona in the, you know, in the 60s and 70s? Because there's some wonderful, you know, photos from your childhood, but you also talk about the experience.
Well, I was born in 1946, so it was just the end of the war. And the war, one of my uncles had been stationed on the border to guard against German invasion. I mean, we have a real threat there. If we get people too pissed off at us to the south, they can help our enemies. So we should treat Mexico a little bit more kindly. There was a lot of cooperation in those days. But we used to just go across the border for lunch or to go shopping. You know, it was about a 45-minute trip from Tucson to Nogales. And we'd go there, and we had a lot of friends. My dad did business with all the ranchers in northern Mexico. So he was very well known among the families there. We'd go to their balls and their picnics and their baptisms and weddings. It was really fun. It just felt like one part of one solid culture. It didn't feel like you're going to another country. I've been in that region for a long time. We always say we didn't move, the border moved. Border migrated.
Right, and I think as you're, you know, you point out in the film that you're talking about a culture that has a couple of hundred years of continuity, and the artistry that you see in the music, the costumes, the playing, the dancing, just the bringing people together, that's not new either. So, you know, we're struggling to keep those, you know, traditions alive, but they're very, very deep.
Well, people say, go back to where you came from. My family came to Southern California in 1769, Northern California in 1769. And they were there through the, you know, when it was under Spain, and then it was under Mexico, and then the United States took it over. So they've been there for generations. And same with Eugene's family. You know, Eugene is fourth or fifth generation in his family, I think, right, Eugene?
Well, my father's father was born in Clifton, Arizona, before Arizona was a state.
Yeah, my grandmother was born before Arizona was a state.
So, Eugene, tell us what you want people to get out of this documentary, and what was your favorite part of making it?
You know, it's impossible to say the favorite part of making, because it encompasses so many. It encompasses decades, so it's really a snapshot of a life, and it's impossible to. I guess I could say that, you know, being in Mexico, my wife was there working on the costumes that she had created, and my son was there playing and working on the production, and so that it was beautiful to be able to be together as a family. I mean, I grew up with Jackson Browne. I still memorize his words. And so having Jackson there, I mean, I never thought I would meet Jackson Browne, let alone go on a trip with him. Linda Ronstadt, on a bus with Linda Ronstadt. Same deal, you know. That was a dream, you know. And I happen to have seen Long Riders in the 1970s, you know, by James Keach and his cohorts of cowboys. So, you know, it was in a way kind of like a life in full circle. I was born in 1962. The 70s were my formative years, and so this film, which shone a light on the work that I've been doing, largely in obscurity, especially in the first years with immigrant families. It was something very moving, very profound to see my life in that kind of full circle. So I guess all of the above, it was just very meaningful. A lot of work, but very meaningful. I forgot the other part of your question. I was transported back in time.
Oh, I was, you know, the you know, your favorite part of making the film, and then the music, the continuity.
Well, the music, yeah. So, you know, people ask about what is traditional music, and I say that traditional music is popular music, just over a larger arc of time. You know, there is some pop music that comes and goes within months or years, but traditional music is popular because people do love it. It's just it just has to have that essential something. It has to have something very essential about it for it to survive. And personally, as much as we've done to help revive folk music over the last few decades, I think of culture as like the weeds under the city sidewalks. You know, they're going to come through one way or the other. And, you know, we just need to, every once in a while, tend to it. And then you see all of a sudden generations of children, all of a sudden, you don't know why, all of a sudden they're just loving it, and they're researching it, and they're going to bring it back. So it's not as delicate as I think people think it is. I think it's very hearty, which is why it lasts so long. And so, but I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to see so many young people embracing their heritage, both sides of the border. I mean, when I was a kid, you know, there was that thing that if you're Mexican American, you're not a real Mexican because you're not from Mexico. There was all these weird stuff. You don't see that so much anymore. There's a lot of these barriers being pulled down, and I just think it's thrilling.
And what's interesting is that in the American imagination, in all the border states, the Mexican experience has always been heavily romanticized with the Californios and the Texas ranchers, and, you know, in Arizona with the tamales, and, you know, and New Mexico with you know, the art and whatnot. But in the lived experience, it seems like people have forgotten that, you know, when in the last election cycle, when a taco truck on every corner was seen as a bad thing. I mean, I wish there was a taco truck on every corner, but food is another way to get culture across. But in terms of music, the joy that surrounds the experience when people get together and play live and play those old songs, the way generations can sing together and participate together, that really binds the community. But also that's what's at risk. And I'm glad that Eugene is saying that it's, you know, there's still a resurgence, and it's all in all popular forms: painting, film, music, dance. You know, there's really a renaissance that's happening right now. Do you want to speak, Linda, about, you know, the younger generation from your vantage point? Because you're a trailblazer, and, you know, you're one of the people that, you know, like Lalo Guerrero that we were talking about, who's also from Arizona, or Dan, that you guys are like the wave that you were the only one at the time, and you inspired so many people. So what do you think about what you see with the younger generation?
Well, there's a band I really love called La Santa Cecilia, and they have a girl singer named Marisol. She's their lead singer. She is fantastic. I just love her. She can sing anything. She can sing rock and roll. She can sing rancheras. She can sing tropical ballads. And they get together and sing outside the jail for the people that have been arrested, the migrants that have been arrested. And, you know, it's just to give them a sense that people care, and that we know they're in there, and we're rooting for them. Remind them where they came from.
Yeah, we've seen, you know, we have friends who are active in Texas and looking at the incarcerations and separations that are happening there. And the photos are horrifying. You know, like, we have to ask ourselves, how did we get here, and how do we get away from it? And I think that the storytellers, the artists, are the ones that are going to really create that record for us, you know, where we not just see it because it's so desensitizing, but that we feel it and know that we can, you know, that we need to respond positively.
Well, we have the tradition in Mexican tradition of the Corrido, which is a ballad song that tells a story of something that truly happened. Eugene got his children interested in that form when bad things would happen at their school. He'd write a corrido about it, and it was their way of dealing with it. You could tell it better than I could, Eugene.
Well, you know, I mean, every culture has its way to tell stories, and every way to process grief. And you know, Mexican Americans, we can sometimes be kind of an opaque folk to the outside world. We can kind of be a bit stoic, you know. And I think that not every culture is romantic in the way they perceive their storytelling. I mean, of course, Mexicans tell love stories in a very romantic way. But in terms of the corrido, I was always attracted to the way that it tells a story as a chronicle. And through that telling, the listener can feel the emotion. They're not being directed to the emotion. And so when those kind of, when there would be tragic death in our community, we would assemble groups of young people to write a corrido. And the process of writing is transformative, but I think the process also of listening to it is transformative in a way that's unique to us. And I think that's something to be honored. You know, I think that every community has its history and its strategies toward overcoming the oppression that we suffer. And all communities suffer that. And we just have to all find our ways and honor our ways to do that and share that with others.
And now we can share it electronically and reach audiences. Like here, we're reaching audiences in 3 or 4 states just right now. I remember talking to Lalo Guerrero about his career, and Luis Valdez says this too, that you know, the migrant worker trails, that the musicians would, you know, there was a season where they would go out and tour to play for the migrants in the fields, and that was an important way to get these stories out there and to get a shared culture. But it was so important to reach people that were on the margins, that didn't really have other avenues of expression, you know, especially in states where there was more segregation and there were sundown, you know, towns and whatnot. To have that capacity, you know, the traveling artist was always important, you know, in our culture. James, can you tell us in terms of your perspective, are you in California right now, or are you in?
Yes. Yeah. I'm in Santa Monica, California.
Okay, great. How do you see from your vantage point what the moment that we're in right now? You talked about the importance of voting. I personally don't want to believe that we're as divided as people say, because I don't see that in my lived experience. I do see that there are areas that are being fomented. So when the Proud Boys or the armed guys go to protest, I don't see that as the norm, but it is something that's real. What do you see around you in Santa Monica?
Well, I agree. I don't think we're as divided as the politicians are trying to make it seem. And I think also that they cause the division to happen. I think that it's a promotion. As you know, as you said in the beginning, you know, every election cycle, this thing is brought up. But you know, the immigration and the border, and you know, and I think people, I'd like to think that people are becoming much more compassionate and empathetic. The idea that 500 families, children, are not with their parents is absolutely sickening. It's beyond anything that I can even comprehend. And you know, so in terms of, if this is the kind of thing you want to have in your society, you know, and that was done by politicians. I don't think most people would do that to families, would divide families. So that's why I say voting is so important. It's because it's the political aspect. But that said, I see our community here in Santa Monica, everybody's getting along. Everybody's, you know, I don't feel that here. You know, I did feel it when I was a kid. You know, I lived in a town that was segregated, and I hated it. And Eugene can speak to Glendale. I don't know, was Glendale segregated when you were a kid growing up over there? I don't think so. You know, I mean, I just think a lot of it is made for political folly, you know, and to separate people. So, you know, and I think it's time that, you know, our films bring people together. And you're absolutely right about the inclusiveness of Hollywood, bringing, you know, supporting more minorities, and it's happening. And it's happening because the pressure has happened from the audience. That's us. And so people are voting on what they want to see too. And so I just think that I'm looking forward to a better world, a more inclusive world. And hopefully film helps, you know, achieve that.
And I think that one thing that's changed in the past 40 years is really the population numbers. When you look at the numbers of the Latino community, the African American community, the Asian community, they've grown. People have put down roots. We've had new waves of immigration. But in the Latino community particularly, I've been saying, you know, during, you know, in my outreach to get people to vote, that every Latino voter really counts for 4 people. You count for the incarcerated person, you know, because of the policing over the past, you know, 50, 60 years, who's a felon who can't vote. They got arrested on some small charge, and then they've got life in prison or something, and they can't vote. You've got the undocumented person who can't vote because they just got here, but their future is at risk. And we're all related, you know, and we all come from the same place. So your vote is, you know, counting on them. Also, you know, the person who served in the military who may not have come back, you know, the cousins, you know, Latinos are very overrepresented in the military and in the military casualties. So there's a lot of them who would have been voters. And when we're seeing an administration where key people, including the president, never served, you know, our voice for those people, you know, so that they did not be forgotten is really critical. And yourself. So this election is not just going to be decided by the people who vote, but by the people who don't vote. So, you know, in the small states that Trump won in the last election, where he got these electoral votes, even though he lost by 3 million popular votes, they brought him over because people in those communities didn't vote. And I know that a lot of Latinos are jaded and cynical because of the reality, but there's only one way to change that. And this is the year. Linda, can you tell us about, you know, what you think is important to vote, and maybe give a message to inspire people to vote?
Well, I always vote by mail because I've always been on the road. So I think there's nothing wrong with voting by mail. That's a fraud, but they said that that's not reliable. Yeah, it's really important to vote. I think you're right. People come from Mexico. They think their vote doesn't count because politics is just a little bit strange down in Mexico. So they think, why bother? But if you don't, you get stuck with the other guy running your life.
Yeah, and all the states that were represented in this audience, Texas, Arizona, California, you know, I'm in Orange County right now, which has been traditionally Nixon-Reagan country, solidly red. And because of the activism and the outreach that happened here during the last election cycle, it went totally blue.
Katie Porter, right?
Katie Porter.
She's my favorite person in the government right now.
Yes, I got so many anti-Katie Porter ads that all started on the internet, that all started, liberal Katie Porter wants to, you know, and I was like, oh my God, I love her. I never would have known of her if they weren't all those anti-Katie Porter ads. And she won. But Texas can go blue. Arizona can go blue. Georgia, we have a friend in the audience from Georgia, you know, but we have the numbers to do it. We just have to get the people out. So, you know, drag your familia, you know, no tacos unless you vote, have a pachanga afterwards, but it's very, very important. Now, I want to open it up to some questions, but I want to plug the film more specifically because it's such a beautiful film. And James, if you can tell us where we can see it, because I want people to see this film.
Well, you can see it on streaming services like Apple, and I think you just go look up Linda and the Mockingbirds, and it'll direct you to where to see it.
And the website is lindaandthemockingbirds.com, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you can see it in the Film Fiesta through tomorrow. So go to ocfilmfiesta.org, buy a ticket. You can, if you click, you know, watch it now, you have 2 days to watch it, but it's only like 45 minutes. It's a really beautiful experience, an engaging experience. And again, the joy that you see, you know, captured in the faces of the kids that are on the trip and the people in the audience, the connection. It's really beautiful. And we need more of that message to kind of filter if you need a break from all the other noise that's happening. So lindaandthemockingbirds.com and
or just go to Apple. Apple TV. I mean, Apple is really promoting it and doing very, very well.
Okay, so go to Apple and definitely see the film. So I want to open it up to people in the audience, and if I could, if it's not calling on someone, Valerie Aranda, who is from Arizona, who's living in Georgia right now, if you don't mind asking a question, is there anything you'd like to ask? No? Okay, well, while she waits, maybe she stepped away. Is there anybody who has a question for any of our participants? And while I'm waiting, I just I have to say just how influential and inspirational Linda Ronstadt is as a musician, all that she's done, all that she's said, and what she means to to California, and the freedom that we identify with the '70s and with singer-songwriters, inspired so many musicians and Latino musicians, and Chicano musicians in particular. Does anybody have a question? Victoria Garcia?
I do, Victor.
Oh, Rob Garcia from San Antonio.
This is for Mr. Keach. What was the full? First of all, it's a beautiful film. I really enjoyed it. As far as from beginning to end, what was the length of time that it took to film this, or you just did it over a certain period of time, a couple of weeks or so?
Well, we filmed, of course. The trip was how long was it exactly, Eugene? I don't recall. It was
the film was in February 2019. It was 3 days of shooting.
Right, 3 days of shooting, and then we started editing, and then we went up to San Francisco
in August.
In August, and then filmed the families up there. So it took a little over a year to put the whole thing together.
Wow. Yeah. That's great. Mr. Rodriguez, how was it how did you, from all the students that you've had, how hard was it to choose the ones that you highlighted in the documentary?
Oh, it wasn't hard. I mean, the reason we chose those kids, they were there when Linda came just around Thanksgiving, and she called me afterwards and said, and we all, we get into a circle and we play and we dance, or they dance. I play. And Linda said, well, let's take the kids to Bonamici. So I said, well, how many? Just take as many who want to come. So we just put the call out, and a lot of families wanted to come, and we brought the adult musicians in the group who are alumni of the Academy. And we ended up being 22. It was going to be 23, but I think someone got a cold. So we just brought who was there. Wow. And we made it happen.
And Ms. Ronstadt, I'm a big fan. I actually really didn't really discover you. I knew who you were. I grew up in the 70s. I was born in 69, grew up in the 70s. But it really wasn't until Canciones came out that I fell in love with the music. First of all, that album, and then went back and listened to a lot of your music, and it's just you're awesome. You're just great.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Are you from again?
Excuse me?
Where are you from again?
From San Antonio.
Oh,
San Antonio. Yeah.
Yeah. I often tell Linda that in our neighborhood, when Canciones came out, I mean, you heard it everywhere. I mean, when the trip that she supported in 1993 that we talk about in the film was to a little jungle village in Veracruz, a Nahuatl village. And this was a place where people still lived with thatch roofs, and they barely had electricity, no paved roads, 2 hours off of any highway. And we took a bunch of kids there because Linda helped us. And when we went to a party in the main town, or not really a town, at the school, they were blasting Canciones de mi Padre in this jungle village in Veracruz. So her music was everywhere. And it was just a few years ago when I revisited her album. And I mean, because sometimes you hear music and you just, you know it so well because you've heard it so much. And you go back and revisit it. And Linda's, the nuances and the power of her voice and the care and the production that she took, it is just so extraordinary. I mean, that like the clips that James includes in the film, it's so riveting. You listen to her sing these songs and it's just so riveting. It tells a story within the notes of the song. And how many artists can do that? I mean, really, that's the pinnacle of art, in my opinion, that you can embody so much with one's voice, with one's body.
And Rob actually is a filmmaker. And Rob, while we have you here, can you talk about your documentary Los Tesoros de San Antonio?
Yes, it's the poster behind me there. It's Los Tesoros de San Antonio. It's a beautiful story that I was one of the co-producers, and I edited the film. It was directed by a good friend of ours, Jorge Sandoval, and produced also by Jesse Borrego, and James Borrego was his brother. James Borrego was the DP. And it's the story of these four, awesome women who had these huge careers during from the 1940s through about the 1970s. Rita Vidauri, Blanca Rosa, Janet Cortez, and Beatriz Llamas. And they had these huge careers, worldwide careers, all from the barrio in San Antonio. And in the 70s, 80s, they were huge. Rita performed with Cantinflas. She performed with Nat King Cole. She was all over the world with these artists. And they kind of went away during the 80s and 90s and stuff. And the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center here had a little gathering, and actually the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center had a concert for Eva Garza, who is another San Antonio native. And one by one, these ladies went up to sing a song for her, and they decided to, get together to form Los Tesoros. A few years later is when we came in, and we were asked by Janet Vasquez, who was with the Film Commission, to record these ladies' stories, and then we ended up putting it together as a documentary. What was really well received. It was really well received pretty much everywhere we went. And last year, the two remaining, we've lost two since. Beatriz Llamas and Blanca Rosa were awarded the National Endowment of the Arts fellowship medals. So they went up to DC, and now they're fellows, which was really exciting for them and for our little film as well.
And your film revived their careers. So even though they had
yes,
obscurity for 20, 30 years, they were revived and went on to inspire the current wave of San Antonio singers, and you told their story nationally. We have time for a couple more questions. Pocha Peña, did you want to ask a question? Can I unmute you?
There's some chat. I think there might be some questions in the chat area.
Okay.
Victor?
Yes.
Victor?
This is
Valerie.
Valerie.
Yeah.
I also typed mine, Victor. Bye.
Okay, so Valerie, go ahead and let us know, and then we'll read.
Well, I just wanted to say that, growing up, I in the 70s, I was born in 1965, and so I grew up listening to Linda's albums and music, and so I always knew her as a rock star. And so, but I remember my grandfather, who lived to be 94, he died in 1995, but for the last, say, 20 years of his life, he would always ask us, like, could you please play these albums of Linda's? And at the time, like, I always knew her as a rock star, so I always wondered why would he want us to play her rock music? It was just funny, like my at the time, 85-year-old grandfather, 80-year-old grandfather would want to listen to Linda Ronstadt. It was just kind of mind-boggling. But of course, that's how I learned of Linda, singing the songs of her Mexicana roots. And that's really where I really understood, like, wow, here's the Mexican-American Chicana woman from Tucson, which is, I'm from Tempe, Arizona, but my grandfather was from Tucson. And it just was a really important moment for me because of how popular she was and how extremely just, powerful she was. And it was just an important turning point for me when I learned of her music, the full range of her music as a Mexicana.
And you're in
Georgia.
You're in Georgia right now, right?
That's right. Yes.
There's a lot of Mexicanos out there now, so.
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
Pocha Peña is asking.
Hey. How you doing, Ms. Ronstadt? Such a
Hi.
fan. Such a fan. Hey, so not only were you one of the few and original bochas, one of the few Latinxes out there, but you were one of the only women out there that was, being a solo entertainer, booking your shows, being on the road, dealing with all those macho men crews. Do you have any tips for other women in the arts and entertainment field who are working with largely male crews? Any tips for the ladies out here?
Hire women in the crews. As soon as you got another girl there, you got somebody out on your side. I could finally afford to hire a woman assistant. It was to change the whole dynamics on the road. Before that, I was swearing like a sailor.
Ah, I love it.
All right, and there are a lot more women in media right now. So producers, writers, technical people, performers. It's your time, and a lot of Latina producers really transforming Hollywood right now.
I also want to say, I have a half sister, Libra Pena, who grew up right across from the El Tiradito Shrine right there in Barrio Viejo. And she's told me so many stories about that old Barrio Viejo, and you have that old Lalo Guerrero song about the Barrio Viejo. Are you thinking of doing any kind of musical tribute or like more explorations of that Tucson barrio that's kind of disappearing a little bit? Every time I go, it keeps getting smaller and smaller.
I would love to have done a collection of Lalo's songs. He was a very good friend of my dad. So I've known him since the age of 2. And I'm friends with his son, Dan. But, I couldn't sing after a certain point. So I would be singing all of his songs right now. Wish somebody would do a tribute to him. He's written beautiful songs. Barrio Viejo was one of the last songs he wrote before he died. And it was just as good as the early songs he wrote. He was writing at the top of his talent all of his life.
And Eugene actually was telling me earlier that he worked on a really popular Lalo Guerrero album that was recorded by Los Lobos in the 90s.
I produced the Papa's Dream, which is the children's album, in 1994. And my brother had written the script, and it called for a grandfather. So we were sitting around with Los Lobos at Caesar's house, and we said, who can play Papa? Who can play the grandfather? Lalo. So I got to be the one to give him. I never met him before, and I got to give him a call, and it was just a thrill to get to know him through that process. But then also a few years after that, we got to do some performances with him around the country, and just a lot of fun. I mean, his stories and his jokes and his music was just a delight to be around him.
Yeah, and I got to
I grew up with him, so that meant that because Eugene made the record, my children got to grow up. They called him Papa Lalo.
All right, and we have a question, another one from San Antonio, Sandra Jean Torres.
Hello, Linda. It's really good. I'm excited. I was yelling for my daughter because she's also a fan. She not only was a filmmaker, also she sang mariachi. And it was funny because I came home one day and I'm like, you know who Linda Ronstadt is? How do you know who Linda Ronstadt is? So she listened to mis canciones de mi padre, and I listened to your 70s because like everybody else, I was born in the 60s. So yes, so this kind of brings us together. My question is for you and for Eugene. As artists and musicians, or as artists, what do you think we can do to improve the unity and improve the pride of the Mexican American people, and that will motivate them maybe to work together to change the way things are, and then also to motivate them to vote? That's my question to you. If you think there's anything we can do, I don't know.
You know better than I do, Eugene.
Well, I've been doing what I do in our working class neighborhood for over 30 years. And I understand that, we Mexican Americans, that we have an independent streak. And I like to see that as our strength rather than as our weakness. I don't feel like we should beat ourselves up because we're not like this other kind of person or that other kind of person. And, there's always a way to do it. You just got to be clever. You got to try to understand where people's deeper interests lay, and create incentives, and also feed your own interests. So and there's and I honestly don't see it as such a problem. I see a lot of people doing a lot of good things together. And, you know, people are very connected if they're immigrants to their pueblos, and a lot of people that I see are very active in raising money for their pueblos and for their causes. When it comes to voting, I think, you know, I think we're dealing with some very deep issues. We're dealing with the issue of what is an American citizen, what is an American, and we've been excluded from that narrative. We have kind of this Puritan myth in this country, and I think that we all have to challenge that. When I hear a student tell me that, you know, they don't feel that they're part of this country, I kind of scold them, because my father would have scolded me if I had said that. And I say, no, you know, the rebels, the illegals are these people who are squatting in the White House. Yeah. We are Americans in more ways than one. So we can't let people get into our heads that way. We have to assume that responsibility. We're doing the work already. Yeah. We're investing into this country already. So I think that it's a matter sometimes of just tweaking the way we see ourselves. And but I think it's important for us to assume that mantle of the establishment, because, you know, we are this country.
Great. And Mr. Keach, real quick, is there anything that you think like we can do to educate the non-Mexican Americans, or to, you know, so that they can embrace us and then maybe see us that we are Americans? You know, I don't know. I never thought of asking a question like that, but I'm sorry.
I think making films, you know, and people getting out there. I listen, my parents immigrated years and years ago. My great, you know, we're all immigrants in this country, and you know, and as we show in the film, I mean, California was Mexico. I mean, Linda says the border moved. We are all citizens of the earth, you know, and I think the most important thing is to really call out racism when you see it, and just say, this is not acceptable. It's just not acceptable. And I think the more people that do it in movies and to music and through writing and just, you know, in schools, you know, and we can't let this thing go, you know. I mean, it's enough already. As a friend of mine said, enough already. Things have to change, and they are changing. I'm very optimistic, you know, that the world is going to change. I just like it to change a little faster.
Yes, I agree. Well, thank you both. Thank all three of you so much. Thank you.
But I want to say that I agree with James about the film. I think culture is incredibly powerful. And if you look at the issue of gay marriage, that was really the popular culture that changed that issue. And I think the same kind of thing has to happen with us. We have to tell our stories, all of them. And we have to tell our connections, all of them. And I think that's super important.
I think we need to connect our stories too. Yes, I think the most important thing is to not keep the stories separate. Right. It's not, oh, this is my story. This is our story. Yes. That, you know, that's how I view the film that we made. This story was the story of my family too. I mean, we didn't sing and we didn't speak Spanish, but you know, there's a scene in the movie where one little boy talks about his father being taken away, and the emotion in that scene from everybody sitting at that table is so powerful to me, and it could be anybody's family anywhere in the world, and that is the connection. It's that we are the same. You know,
yeah, and I think that if you look at the history of the southwestern states, the ones that are kind of in conflict, you know, as being, oh, there's immigrant invasion, historically they've been very, very multicultural and inclusive. In California, in the early 1800s, you had people from Russia, from England, from Peru, you know, from Mexico, from, you know, everywhere. It was a multiracial, multicultural, multilingual society. California's first constitution was bilingual when it became a state. Texas, same thing. They, you know, the government of the Tejanos, before it was Texas, the Mexicanos, invited Anglo immigration in, very welcoming, and same with Arizona and New Mexico. So this whole thing of being told that it's in a xenophobic country is not historically true from our cultures. We have a lot to offer, And you know, I think we haven't talked about what we need to do to get the Latinos for Trump to vote for blue, especially those that are related to us. But that's another conversation entirely. I wanted to wrap it up by asking Linda one question, because we talked about Papa's Dream, you know, with Lalo Guerrero, and I want to hear what Mama's dream is. I want to hear what Linda Ronstadt's dream is for this country. What we can be if we just stand up and do it.
Well, to stop dehumanizing whole sections of people. When I was marching with Dolores Huerta a couple of years ago in Phoenix about immigration rights, I was looking at little children that were wearing t-shirts that say, "We are human." Oh. You have to remind people that you're a human being with the same feelings. The farm workers get just as hot as we would get if they're bent over double picking strawberries in the full sun up to sundown. They suffer the same pangs of hunger. They're just as uncomfortable with terrible housing. They need sanitation. But it's considered, oh, they don't suffer as much. The heat doesn't bother them as much. They're marginalized. That kind of added. And that's the same thing that happened with the African Americans. They thought, oh, they don't mind picking cotton in the sun. They don't feel the heat the same way. Got to get rid of that perception.
So it's going back to telling our stories. If we don't tell our stories, other people will, and those are the stories that they'll tell, and that's what people are going to believe. So especially now, where you have the internet, where you can get on 20 platforms to say something, it's important to say it now, to get out and tell your story, to get your people out there to vote for those who can't, whose lives are on the line, and for people who are younger, who are just coming to this conversation. When you turn 18, you're required to register for the draft, but you don't register to vote. You know, they can take you away to fight in a war, but you don't use that responsibility or right or privilege that you have to actually speak up, not only at the national level, which is super critical, but at the local level, at the state level. All that's on that form when you vote on November 3rd. So Valerie Aranda from Arizona says, thank you, Linda, for your song strength and persistence over the years. Abrazos. And I also want to echo that by saying thank you for being an inspiration for all you do, for all that you continue to do and you have yet to do. So thank you for joining us. And one of the things that we like to do with our Q&As is just give an applause at the end. So if everybody wants to unmute yourself and just applause, that'd be...
Woo! Woo!
Yes,
yeah, Linda.
All right, so
we love you.
So thank you everybody for joining us for this super special Q&A. We're extremely grateful and thankful for Ms. Ronstadt and Eugene and James for making it happen. They're all superstars in their own right. See the film Linda and the Mockingbirds through to tonight at ocfilmfiesta.org. You can stream it on Apple and Amazon and other vehicles, and also go to lindaandthemockingbirds.com. So this is our final Q&A for the festival. We conclude the virtual OC Film Fiesta. Thank you all for participating. Denver, San Antonio, thank you for participating in the festival as well. And we will see you next year.